Electile Dysfunction 2016 coverage continues. Today, Rick Santorum and Jeb Bush come up a little bit short. But we're going to start with Jeb. Now, Jeb has pitched himself for a long time, even though he's not even officially running yet, as the most electable candidate. And the way that he was going to prove that was by raising a promised $100 million. Because that's what elections are about. It's not about ideas. It's not about the voters. It's about huge bankrolls. Unfortunately, he's not going to be able to do it. Bush told donors in April that the operation had raised more money in its first 100 days than any other Republican organization in modern history. That's the good news. But any figure short of $100 million will probably be seen as a sign of weakness by senior party strategists and donors. That's the bad part. So, look, he's raising a ton of money. He is going to best some of the others who've raised a lot of money, including Ted Cruz, who's been doing quite well for himself, others who are backed by some of these Republican conservative businessmen, the billionaires. They're raising a lot of money too. Jeb is still going to beat them, but he's not going to make good on his at least vague promise to gather $100 million in initial fundraising.
So lots to say about this because this is not one of your standard run-of-the-mill political stories that we see about Jeb Bush literally every day. Oh, he had a not cabinet, but a staff shakeup. Like, I guess people who are inside the Beltway care about that, but nobody in the real world cares who's his chief strategist versus his campaign manager.
No.
Oh, he didn't get all of his brother's supporters behind him yet.
Yeah. We care somewhat when he gathers around him all of these former George W. Bush advisors. We care about that.
So that's exactly right, because that's actually relevant, because if you have Paul Wolfowitz on your foreign policy team, which he does, well, that tells me you'd like to invade more countries. That's super relevant. But if, like, oh, you know, the governor of Mississippi used to support George W. Bush, but he hasn't endorsed Jeb Bush yet, please stop wasting our time.
Yeah, I don't care.
Okay, so now this is relevant for a number of reasons. Number one, look at the assumption that goes into this kind of reporting. So whoever has the most money is the front runner. Now, as I've told you, the best that Jeb Bush has ever done is tied for first in some polls because it's such a crowded field. But he often does not come in first. In fact, in some important polls, he's come in fifth, right? So he's not actually leading by any real metric other than who has received the most amount of bribes.
Yeah.
Which is then goes to the second point, which is, isn't that amazing? It's celebrated as a strength. Like the more legal bribes you can take from people who clearly want something back in return for their millions of dollars, the stronger you are. And the fact that the fact that you haven't gotten to 100 million in a very short period of time, they've only been bribed to the tune of 89 or 98 million dollars. Ooh, weakness.
Yeah, when he isn't even officially running yet.
Yeah.
But I mean, when you can get a lot of bribes, it inspires confidence. Whenever I try to pass into disputed territory in Eastern Europe, I always go for the guy at the checkpoint who he gathers the most. Okay, and then I bring him into my cabinet.
That's right.
But yeah, it is pathetic, and I love the contrast with someone like a Bernie Sanders, who how is he going to get people to support him? He is going to push forward policies that are almost universally popular for most people in America, that challenge the status quo, that go against what most of the cowards in the Democratic Party would never be willing to say, even if they believe that it would be a good policy. He does that. Jeb Bush does one flub after another while gathering up millions of dollars. And then that's worthy of as much coverage as Bernie Sanders, apparently.
It's also wrong-headed. They thought that if Jeb Bush comes in with $100 million or some overwhelming amount, the rest of the field, and the reporting literally says this, and the Washington Post media and other places that have covered it, they would almost be intimidated out of the race. Well, if we don't have all the donors behind us, well, especially since they're Republicans, what use are we?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. We have nothing else to bring to the table.
But the reality is it doesn't really work that way anymore because now we have unlimited contributions. So at any given point, one particular billionaire can come in and go, yeah, okay, you got $100 million. I don't care. Here, I'll give Santorum $30 million. He's instantly competitive with you. Oh, yeah? I'll give him $200 million. Now he's got more than you do.
Even though they can't officially coordinate.
Right. And that would go to their super PACs, and they would be independent expenditures.
Yes.
And actually, Bush's most trusted advisor is not on his campaign. The guy who was his chief strategist for his two gubernatorial races in Florida is actually running a super PAC. Because the guy running the super PAC is more important than the guy running your campaign. Isn't that amazing? Now you think, well, nobody's going to give $200 million. No, you're wrong. First of all, the Koch brothers are raising almost $1 billion. They're not, I don't think, going to give it to just one candidate.
Yeah.
But that is an awful lot of money, and they could conceivably give hundreds of millions to one presidential candidate. And Adelson in the past has given $30 million at a time to people like Newt Gingrich.
To huge failures.
Yeah.
He's great at politics.
But you know what?
Best.
Newt Gingrich would have been out of the race like that if Adelson hadn't given $30 million. And next thing you know, Newt Gingrich was competitive and almost won.
Yeah. Yeah, so Jeb did come up a little bit short. Don't worry, he's still a whore. He's just not as good of a whore as he promised you he would be. Now, Santorum also had a pretty bad weekend. He went to one of his small campaign stops and was greeted initially by one person waiting for him. And after what was probably 2 or 3 minutes of awkward silence as he looked around the room hoping anyone else would notice that this was Rick Santorum, who had won in Iowa in the primaries a cycle earlier, he said, "I haven't eaten, actually, all day," to his guest, Peggy Tuft, an insurance agent and chair of the county's Republican Party. So he was able to pull the chair of the party. That is good. He further went on to say the low turnout wasn't surprising, but all part of the plan. In fact, if hundreds have shown up, he would have had to pull out of the race altogether because his plan apparently wouldn't have been working.
Yeah, if as many people as show up to Bernie Sanders events showed up to Rick Santorum and be like, whoa, we're off script here. I don't know what to do.
Get my strategist. What the hell is going on?
I didn't expect to be popular.
Yeah.
My plan was appeal to a few billionaire donors and they'll power my campaign. What the hell are you guys doing here?
A few donors, and I was hoping that people would be turned on by a pathetic-looking candidate. I don't look pathetic anymore. What's the point?
So, I love this story for a number of reasons. But first, that moment when he says, "Oh, okay, Peggy, thanks for showing up. I guess let's grab lunch together." That's one of the saddest things I've ever heard. It almost makes my heart break for Rick Santorum.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is hard to do, and trust me, I didn't get there. Okay, and then later, as they're eating lunch, 3 other people show up, presumably for Santorum, but perhaps for lunch.
And they walked in, and I was like, "Hey, is that Rubio? Ah, let's sit down."
And then the one person who showed up initially was the Republican Party chair.
Yeah.
He's almost obligated to show up.
Yeah, you kind of
It's a tiny little town. If a Republican shows up at one of the candidates, if she doesn't go, what's she really doing?
No, like, to be fair, it is a small town, but that's still not good. You don't want to show up and have a couple of people. I could show up in that town and pull one person. I've got Grindr. Come on.
And finally, this goes to that's funny.
Anyway.
I bet if Santorum did Grindr, if he Santorumed on Grindr, he would have gotten a lot more people to show up. Finally, it goes to show you how incredibly weak the field was last time around. Rick Santorum finished second to Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney.
No, he eventually won. And they did the recounts afterward. He did win.
No, he won in Iowa. No, I'm saying he finished second overall.
Oh, yes.
Overall.
Yeah.
To Mitt Romney. And Romney struggled.
He's the Hillary of the Republican Party.
I can't believe how pathetic the field was last time and how much Mitt Romney struggled with it anyway.
Yeah.
Right. So now this time around they are quote unquote stronger, whatever that means. Like they raise more money, they're more ruthless. You know, it's a motley crew of despicable people. So the Republicans are like, this field is strong. We like it.
Not one believer in gravity. That's the way it should be. Anyway, that's today in electile dysfunction.